Today we're going to be talking about a process called cell division, and we're going to specifically look at this cycle. It's a part of Chapter 3 where we're talking about processes that happen in your cells. So cell division is something that's constantly happening in your cells, and it's the reason that cells can die and new cells can actually come to be. And so it's through this process that we as organisms can maintain kind of equilibrium within our bodies and our cells. So before we can start talking about the cell cycle, there's a few terms that we need to talk about, which are going to be these three boxes up here. So we're actually going to sketch a picture of each. So the first term that we're going to talk about is chromatin. So that's our first box here is chromatin. And we've actually talked about chromatin before. Chromatin sits inside of the nucleus. And that's my sketch for chromatin. Okay, it's kind of this long strand, and within it is DNA. So that holds all the genetic material. So your first sketch for chromatin is just kind of this squiggly line. Okay, our next term that we're going to talk about is a chromatid. So a chromatid is actually when a chromatin, and notice that chromatin ends with an N, chromatid ends with a D, so they're two different words. So chromatid is when chromatin actually coils itself up really, really, really tightly. So here's my sketch for chromatin. It's going to be when you kind of have that structure and it's just really, really, really tightly packaged and condensed. Okay, so the chromatid is densely or tightly packed chromatin. So it's pretty much like this, just sort of spiraled to make a chromatid. And the reason it needs to spiral is because we have so much DNA within every single one of our cells that if it was just really spread out like this, it wouldn't fit into the nucleus of all of our cells. So that's why it actually sort of tightly packs itself up into what we call a chromatid. Now I'm also going to draw kind of like a central location, and we're going to talk about what that is in a little while. Okay, now once chromatids have densely or tightly packed together, they actually find their matching chromatid. So two chromatids pair up together, and that forms something called a chromosome. So it's no more than two chromatids that have sort of packaged up together, and this whole thing is called a chromosome. Now, the center dot that I keep drawing is actually what holds the chromatids together, and this is called the centromere. Okay. So we've got all of our genetic material terms down. So again, this is all the same thing, it's just that it's in a different form. So chromatin is DNA. Chromatin densely packs itself up to form a chromatid. Chromatids find their matching pair, and that forms something called a chromosome, and they connect in the center at what we call a centromere. And so you've actually, as humans, in every single one of our cells, our body cells, we have 23 sets of chromosomes. And on our chromosomes is where all of our traits are actually found. Okay, so the next part of our notes that we're going to move towards is our fill in the blanks. So this process is called cell division, and specifically we're going to talk about the cell cycle. So your cells are constantly going through cycles. So the cell cycle occurs in a series of stages or phases. The process of cell division actually occurs in the nucleus of your cells. And the reason it occurs in the nucleus is because that's where DNA is. Okay, during the cell cycle, the genetic material, or the chromatin, and remember you can look up at your picture, the chromatin will actually double. So the chromatin inside of your cells, when your cell is getting ready to divide to form a new cell, it will actually make a copy of this chromatin. So it would actually make a duplicate of this. So it will double before the cell divides. Okay. The genetic material is then copied exactly from the original cell. The parent cell, and we call the parent cell the initial cell that's doing the division. So the genetic material is copied exactly from the original cell, which we call the parent cell, to the new cells. And the new cells that are going to be formed from cell division, we call the daughter cells. So you've got the parent cell that's actually copying its DNA, and then eventually it will create a new cell, and we would refer to that cell as the daughter cell. Alright, so we're going to jump down and take a look at the three main phases of the cell cycle. So the process by which your cells divide, we call the cell cycle, and there are three main parts to the cell cycle. The first stage of the cell cycle is called interphase. And again, remember, this process is happening in your cells. This is how new cells form in our body. So there's interphase, there's another phase called mitosis, and then there's our last phase, which is called cytokinesis. Okay, now there are three main phases of the cell cycle. We're going to focus on the phases that take place in mitosis. So you can kind of think of this like this is the beginning phase, this is sort of the middle phase, and then this kind of ends the cell cycle process. We're going to focus on this middle stage called mitosis. So within mitosis, there are actually 4 stages. The first stage of mitosis is called prophase. The second stage of mitosis is called metaphase. And the third stage of mitosis is called anaphase. And then the last phase of mitosis is called telophase. So again, all 4 of these are the stages of mitosis. And you'll notice they all end in the word phase, meaning a state of being. And we're going to take a look at what happens during each of these stages. Now here's a really good mnemonic device that can sort of help you remember the stages of mitosis. If you can remember PMAT, PMAT stands for all of the stages of mitosis. So P stands for prophase, M stands for metaphase, A stands for anaphase, and T stands for telophase. So if you can remember PMAT, you can actually remember all of them. And I just sort of say it's pro, meta, ana, and telo. And then they all end with the word phase. So if you can remember PMAT, pro, meta, ana, telo, phase, they all end in the word phase. So those are the 4 stages of mitosis. Okay, so before you move on to the back page, just make sure you've got everything filled in on this front page, and then we're going to take a look on the back side. Okay, so I know the back of this might look a little confusing, but what I suggest doing is actually taking a look at using maybe two colors. So I'm going to actually use two colors on this page for my drawings in the boxes. And we'll pick up with this in part 2.